My name's Kozan. I'm a member of the Sokokoji Buddhist community in Traverse City, and our guiding teacher is Sokuzan. Sokuzan is the abbot of Sokokoji Monastery in Battle Creek, Michigan. He's been coming up to Traverse City since 2009 to support his students up here. And there's a growing number of us, and we practice together on Tuesday nights. We're renting space right now at the Ulu. So Sokuzan comes up once a month for our day-long retreats, and he said he was going to spend 5 days with us. So we thought, what can we do to offer a public talk about meditation? Sokuzan has a unique way of working with the mind through the practice of meditation. So you'll hear about that. Sokuzan's been practicing a long time, since the late 60s, I think, and he met his first Buddhist teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a Tibetan teacher in the 70s, 1973, and went to seminary with him in 1980. And then when that teacher passed, he found a Zen teacher, Kobuchino Roshi, of the Soto Zen lineage of Japan, and he became ordained in 2007 and Dharma transmitted in 2013. So he's here to talk to us about the battle of ego.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. So the title of this talk, The Battle of Ego, is a series of talks that my teacher, Tibetan master, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, gave. I think the first one was in 1970. And I can't do what he did. So, but I thought it was a good title. You guys came. So I got to figure out what to say. But the ego, we all know it's a common psychological term for self-centeredness, and in its extreme, narcissism, vanity, but in the more subtle ways, ego is just the dynamic that functions in consciousness that operates as me. The dynamic in consciousness that operates as I. That's more, I want this, or as for me, I don't care. So there's a very subtle difference there, but they're both personal pronouns that only you will use in reference to yourself, thereby strengthening this position. It's not real, and it is so unreal that it operates more like a stage play. It's convincing because it's always in our face. We're always looking at the drama of ego, and sometimes it gets ramped up to the battle of ego. I'm not just talking about someone out there who's taking a whole country to war based on their ego, but that's there also, and that's all over the place, as we all know. It's everywhere. It's coming and going and coming. Very difficult to stop that. Once that kind of energy starts in the form of the common word is a dictator or a oligarch or whatever, once that starts, even if it's in a corporation, very difficult to hold that back because of the structure that supports it and got that person in there in the first place. And so I often say, don't go to war with anything. Don't fight with anything. Don't fight with your ego. But on the other hand, if I say that to someone, it's very difficult to see what that actually is, what that battle actually is, and how it starts. We don't really notice that area of the mind that is slowly locking and loading in the back room. So you might not come out with it, but you're getting ready to meet someone on what a psychological battlefield called your conversation, your relationship. It could be a family member. Sometimes family members have the most difficulty because there's a blood connection and they can't just leave that person, so they continually try to either win or make peace. Both of those are misunderstandings. If you try to make peace, misunderstanding. Don't do that. And when I say don't do that, I would like questions about that, because that is not something you're going to hear very often. Most people are trying to go to peace, but it's just a polarity. In order to understand what this is deeply, you have to, when I say you have to, you can do whatever you want. You're going to be here for another hour or so. You're giving me permission. I intend to speak, tell you something. When you leave, I often say, and I'll say it today, and I say it just about every time I talk, at least in the last couple of years, is don't believe a word I say. Use your own intelligence. Use what you can. If something I say is helpful, by all means, put that in the hopper, leave it there, check it every now and then, or reflect on it, or contemplate it. Believe I'm not here to get followers. I don't need anybody to follow me anywhere. So my motivation for being here is I understood something based on what my teachers and the Sangha, the community that I was with over the last quite number of years, 40-some years. And maybe I should tell other people about it. We have a community here, and sometimes it's kind of rough around the edges, when you say. Yeah. On the other hand, the intention here is not to win or rough people up or come out ahead. The intention here is to train our own minds and support others who are training their minds, and whatever it takes to do that. Sometimes that's not always so pleasant. My teacher once said that the Sangha is not, the people in the Sangha, the community of people are not people that you would necessarily be friends with, because friends usually, love you no matter what you do, and they know you're, kind of mistaken on occasion. They're not allowed to tell you that because they love you so much. Besides, you're an adult, you can do whatever you want. On the other hand, the Sangha are the community of people who are practitioners because of their style and their way of relating, especially if you have the same teaching person. Then the teaching person, if they're a true teacher, loves everybody and takes care of everybody, and is, although it may look like it, they're not particularly critical of those people. It may look like it. Is that correct? This is Sokuzan is a fully ordained monk, as my wife is, So we give them a little bit harder time than other people. So the battle of ego shows up in our own minds. We get up in the morning, and maybe there's a battle with, oh, here I go again. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why I feel so bad. I don't know, sometimes if you have a negative feeling, I'm sure you've noticed, or maybe talked to others, if you have a negative feeling, and the ego mind, the self-centered mind, can't stand, but has no patience. Might put on patience for the benefit of others, see how patient I am, but it has no patience with its own emotions and feelings. This is what meditation, as I teach it, and it is taught by others, is about, is to train your mind to settle down and be aware of what's happening, because as soon as you make imputations or guesswork about the mind, you immediately cover up the very thing that needs inspecting. So therefore, it ends up in battles, a tug of war between this and that. It could be your mate. It could be your own things in your own mind. It might be your son, your daughter, your coworkers, your boss, or your employees, or just somebody at the coffee shop. Have you noticed how sometimes you can get extremely mad at somebody, and really they haven't done too much. They just triggered something that was kind of cooking under your ribs back here somewhere. And you have not inspected it. You have not inspected it. So when somebody comes along that frequency is very similar, suddenly a little bit of anger out here, and then you roar at them, possibly. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just talking about my experience. So one of the ways that we can work with this, and I'm pretty biased in this area, looked a lot of different directions, but it seems like a strong awareness practice, whether you become a Buddhist or not, is not so important. It might help, but only you would know about that. I'm not here to convert anybody to anything. That is actually disrespectful to people, to sell anyone a bill of goods on anything. That being said, you might want to take out of your 24 hours, I think I've got the math right there, out of your 24/7, find a spot, sit down, hold still, sit in a symmetrical position, because the mind and the body are not two different things. They just look like it. And they tend, the more chaos, the more confusion, they tend to separate. We tend to draw up into our thinking process, trying to figure things out. We tend to shut out the body part of it, or shut down on it. And as we know, you may know, at least you've heard of people who get physically ill because of mental situations that are happening. They're intimately connected. I would even go so far as to say they're not separate at all. They're not two different things. We can't find the mind. We can't get the mind, catch it in a box and calm it down or pour something over it or whatever, even though sometimes we do use liquids to soothe the mind. So, but what I would say is, and that's not incorrect. That's totally, it's a relative situation. So, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that might be okay, but usually sometimes it can get overdone. So what I would say is, sit down and hold still. And if you hold very still for a length of time without being rigid, and I'm not talking about the Zen tradition where we see the Zen masters hitting people with sticks and stuff like that. Just a macho thing that comes out of ancient Japan. And if there's someone from the Japanese culture, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. I don't see anyone, but you never know. Because it's out of the culture. It's a very strong macho, masculine kind of energy that gets mixed with Buddhism. That wasn't happening particularly in India or China, though I wasn't there. I don't know. So if you hold still, if you take that part of our being, our sensorium, hold everything still, which is very easy to do. There's no struggle at all. Just sit down, hold still. I recommend this. This is an ancient posture called cosmic mudra. It just means that you're forming an oval with your thumbs and first fingers. It's just a very simple, symmetrical thing, something you would never do casually, particularly. And you might find yourself doing this if you've been meditating for a few years. But this is symmetrical also, and this is fine. It's just that we quite often do this casually. This is about doing something a little bit pretentious, a little bit artificial, because after you've done it for a few months, it's not artificial at all. It's just something you take up this posture, hold very still, and you watch what continues to move. You don't close your eyes, you don't plug your ears, you don't go in a sensory deprivation tank. I'll say this twice. You're not trying to get anywhere. If you think there's something to accomplish, you'll go in circles of success and failure and success and failure. What you are looking for, I don't care what it is, happiness, peace, bliss, contentment, whatever it is right in front of you all the time. It's right in front of you. And what we would do with it? We cover it up because we're afraid. And that ties into the ego structure that wants some kind of success or wants some kind of credential or some kind of proof that they're going to be okay. Not easy. I'm not saying you can't sit down and meditate and feel better and feel more relaxed and feel less likely to interfere in other people's lives, including your own. But more likely to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. You'll notice, instead of getting more peaceful, what you'll notice if you practice meditation a lot, you'll notice that you're more likely to give somebody who's angry at you the benefit of the doubt because you look at them and you see that they must be suffering a lot to be giving me such a hard time. That is not something you can see without, I don't think, without some kind of mind training. There are a few people who can see that just because they came into this world with that kind of karma. So I call this training the mind. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves, do a lot of it. A lot. We've already spent this lifetime dealing with our upbringing and our culture and the way we've been treated or the way we've not been treated. And this is an opportunity. In Buddhism, there's something called the four dharmas, or the four reminders that turn the mind towards the dharma or towards the truth. And the first one is first contemplate the preciousness of being free and well-favored, difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. And so preciousness, value, very, very valuable, preciousness of being free to come to this gathering. There are places where you can't do this. You can't just come to a meeting. Well-favored in that if you're in this room and you read that poster or you talked to somebody about what this was, you're probably not particularly trapped in your beliefs, opinions, concepts, and ideas and bias. I'm not saying you don't have some of that. You're not trapped by it. What's the common word for that? Open mind. You have an open mind. I'll go check this out and see what this is about. Don't take anybody's word for anything. And again, I'll repeat it again. Don't believe a word I say. But since I'm here, you could listen, give it the benefit of the doubt. What's that like? Because everything I'm saying and everything you're hearing is that we were in different worlds, and we are. isolated and separated into our ideas, our opinions, our beliefs, our structures, our hopes, and our fears. Those have us. You don't need to live that way. But there again, it's up to you to address that. It's not about promoting anything in particular, other than I would say, train your mind. Sometimes when people come and you see the battle, speaking of battle of egos, see the battles going on in our society, and I'm not here to talk about any of those. I don't need to. Watch MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, take your pick, it's all over. But sometimes people want to get moved by that. So I got to do something. What should I do? And if someone's a teacher, if I could say it that way, someone's a teacher of mine, in other words, a student, if they come to me and they ask me about what should I do, and I say, train your mind. I say, well, what about what's happening here? Shouldn't I join that or do something? And I might say, depending on who it is, and that would be a lot, I might say, well, you could do that. But if you do that, be very careful that you're not taking your own unexamined aggression you've been stuffing, into an area where there's so much incredibly mindless aggression happening that you start resonating with it. And the next thing you know, against your will, you're drawn into that cyclone. And the next thing you know, you're having difficulty. You'd say no more about it, but I'm not saying stay away. I'm saying keep in touch. Always watch what's going. Watch the news. Watch what's happening. Listen to what people are saying. As far as joining it, I would hesitate before I would march into something like that. Even though it's very tempting sometimes. People are in so much trouble. We want to help. So before you do that, you might want to help this situation. Find out who this is, so the aggression is, at least, you may not get rid of the aggression, but it's a really good idea to be aware that you have it, so that the possibility of projecting it onto somebody else and then fighting it with them. You're actually fighting with your own aggression in the form of someone else. Questions are good if you have that. I can continue to chatter all night. You have any question, sir?
There seems to be this word being thrown around about mindfulness.
Yeah.
And I get, so when you're doing formal meditation or sitting on the cushion, you're trying to, you're not trying to do anything right. You're just allowing things to happen.
You need to ask me a straight question, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll listen to you, but if you want to.
So my question
Straight
is,
question.
if you're not feeling anything from the formal meditation, what keeps you in the game? If you're not feeling a little bit more calm or, like, say, blissful or less reactionary, then what makes you go to the cushion every day? Several
things. One could be the teaching. I mean, if you'd read the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Samdhina Mochana Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, one of the basic texts of Mahayana Buddhism, then you might be resonating out of those concepts, especially if you've studied it with other people, with Sangha, or you might have a strong connection to the teacher. I would not be here if it weren't for my teachers. I was way too confused and in circularity, going around chasing my own tail. I would have done that the rest of my life without meeting my teacher, at least for sure the first one. So it's not about getting more peaceful. I'm not saying that people who practice mindfulness, whatever their style is, whether it's Vipassana, closing the eyes, counting the breath, or following the breath, I'm not saying they won't feel more peaceful. They will. I mean, that's just calming down. It stands to reason. Sit down, hold still, don't do anything. Maybe you have some kind of a object of meditation. Tibetan lineages teach looking at a Buddha form or a crystal or possibly a flame or a stick of incense. But that's about trying to control the mind. I don't teach that. I did for a number of years, you could say decades. I don't do that anymore. And I didn't make a decision about it. I just stopped doing it and started teaching what's the Japanese call shikantaza, which translated into English means just precisely this. So when you sit down, hold still, that's it. I mean, it's never going to be it because it never lasts. Whatever you look at is always changing, but you won't see that, particularly if you're trying to create a kind of mind. I don't teach creating a mind. I teach seeing a mind.
That's really hard in the West because we're always striving for something.
That's why you need a teacher.
Trying to get better.
That's why you have to have a teacher. I understand, sir. Yes, why you need a teacher. You can't do it without a teacher. And I'm not saying you have to give the teacher all your money or follow the teacher's feet, or it doesn't have to be a guru or something like that, but somebody understands what this is. And don't settle. Don't, if you think you might want to study with, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't make sure that you test that situation. You're correct. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, yes, it's called spiritual materialism. My teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, a series of his talks published in 1972 was called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. It's a book that we teach every Tuesday night and have been for decades. I don't know how many groups do we have studying that book? 4 or 5. In Petoskey and in Kalamazoo and in Grand Rapids and in Battle Creek up here, Ionia. So the idea is to not get rid of the idea that you can feel better, more peaceful, or so on. But it seems to, because spiritual materialism is the desire to use spiritual techniques to change, to improve. This is materialistic. It's not a mundane path. Or a mundane path, then you can lift weights and get stronger. It's a spiritual path. So you lift spiritual weights and you find out the nature of strength. You don't get stronger necessarily. You find out the nature of you find out the fundamental nature of what it is you're doing, of ambition, the fundamental nature of what the identity, the ego. Is there a solid ego? There is not. But I don't want you to believe what I'm saying. I'm saying turn the awareness around. It takes a while to turn the awareness around, sometimes decades. Turn the awareness around so that you eventually see there's no one here. Not only that, there's no one out there. I'm not saying there isn't something out there, but I'm saying what I see is not separate. I don't see separate beings. That enables me to work with everyone very, very separately. I mean, everyone where they're at, because I will see the whole world in everyone I see. And that's not a fancy religious feeling or romantic. It's just the truth. So therefore, that's how that seems to work. More question about that if you have it. Certainly, go ahead.
Why did you shift from using objects to focus on to just a plain wall? It seems like a big transition.
Yeah, it's not a shift. So you're actually, when you're looking at the wall with your eyes open, you might look at the wall, you or anyone might look at the wall for a while, but eventually you'll look at anything that's moving. Something standing still, if it's not moving, then you'll move it. The first thing people report when the first few months is that the wall is moving. The wall looks like cottage cheese. I see all kinds of faces. And so I don't mind. Go ahead. My instruction is this simple. Sit down, hold still, keep the back straight, have all the senses open, and watch whatever moves in any of the 6 sense fields, any of the objects of this, including the mind. Watch the movement. Don't add to it. I like it. I don't like it. It's good. It's bad. Don't subtract from it. Don't do anything with it. Don't manipulate it. But if you do manipulate it, then watch the movement of the manipulation. So it has layers of sophistication that go deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is how we train the mind to see what is actually true. What is actually true, not true and false part, but what is fundamentally true. What is fundamentally true doesn't have an opposite. It's called absolute. And even though it has a fancy concept, it is available. It's available to human beings. I don't know if it's available to raccoons or not. We don't have any raccoons for students. But my teacher once said, if you could get a horse to listen, you could teach him to meditate. And I always wonder what he meant by that. Sir, more about that is good. If there's other areas you could ask about there.
Something it's Taoism.
It's, well, I pronounce it Taoism, but you can pronounce it any way. But that's the watercourse way, and it's not separate from the Buddhist teaching. So just whatever happens, that's it. The issue, their form of circulating the light, their kind of meditation, which I looked into, is still more about a developing kind of thing. I'm not against that. If we were in ancient China, I'd probably all be doing that. But this is what I teach. Not better than anyone else's, but you're listening to me, and I can't teach that.
Thank you.
Welcome. You practice that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a teacher?
Yeah.
That's missing. Find a teacher. Go to China. Find one. Well, why not? What else are you going to do?
First I got to Traverse City. That was hard enough.
I follow you. It's hard for me to get up here, too. I've been hearing about cherries since I was a little kid. question back there?
Well, you said watch the river moving in front of you.
Yes,
And then.
or in the mind, or in the mind.
Yeah, or in the mind. So if you, and then you'll see what's really there, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, but maybe not right away. You might see for a while, you're going to see what you think is there. So it takes a while of doing that repetition, not adding on. Don't put more layers of thoughts and concepts and ideas and judgments on top of it. It takes a while. So that's why it's called training. And that's why you need a teaching person. So he, she, they, you can sit down and say, this is happening, that's happening. And then that teacher can say, no, go back to the cushion. Or whatever they say. They might change your, I don't know how many students I have, a couple dozen or something, but if they're close students of mine, they're practicing in different ways because I modify their practice according to what they're dealing with. Some people are dealing with extremes of extreme depression. Some people are former drug users. I teach and train other people to teach in rehab places, taught in there, and in prisons all over Michigan. So it depends on if somebody's in a jail cell and I'm talking to them, I have to relate with them. They say, well, what do I do about the noise? I say, you got toilet paper? Yeah. I say, watch them up with your ears, make a baffle, and then sit still. And then listen watch whatever moves. If it's people clanking, making noise, that's your meditation. Sit down, hold still, shut up, watch what moves. And over time, you eventually make yourself at home in the environment you're stuck with. Those people in steel boxes and things, it's just a horrible situation, horrible way to treat people who make mistakes, go wrong. Even if they're deliberately doing things, you can still help them in other ways, as you know. Not to go up on a tangent on that. I just think about it sometimes. Further question on that?
Well, I just wondered because you said, like, some people see faces, they'll see cottage cheese, then they thought immediately, okay, so person's in there, they see a face in the wall, and they're like, oh, now there's a face in my wall. Oh, I never noticed that before. Oh, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to judge the fact there's no face in there. It's just what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Right
Okay,
now.
what's the
It's not
question?
the reality.
What's the question?
Just, I don't know, I guess layers of the reality.
Yes, but here's the thing that's different is every day, and if you lived at the monastery, which you don't, but if you did, the people who are there agree to come and practice sitting meditation 6.5 hours every weekday, and almost that much on Saturday. So it's a monastery. It's not a spa. That doesn't mean that you have to move it to. You think it's a spa? Usually when she laughs, I've said something wrong. So, but even if you don't live there, you could still come there sometimes. Come there for retreats or something. And the only reason I'm saying about looking at the wall and seeing things happen is that eventually that dies out. Eventually, it's just not that entertaining. And eventually, you start to notice your birds out in the flying, cardinals out in the treetops, and notice sounds down the hallway, or you notice your own mind, the way your mind will start to ramp up different ideas and retrace memories. If you do that enough, you start to have memories that you thought you totally never hadn't had in 15, 20 years. Start to come back because you're not doing anything. You're holding everything still, and the movement will keep trying to take you into that labyrinth we call the technical word of samsara, or the circularity of this world. It's called the 8 worldly dharmas: success, failure. Just very simply, up and down, back and forth, night and day, male and female. Life and death is the big one that people think those are two different things. You can't have life without death. You can't have death without life. So you can't have night without day, light without darkness. So it is an awareness. It's not something to suddenly go and write philosophy about. Well, you could, but you'd just be one of a bunch of philosophers. Yes?
What is movement?
Anything that's not holding still. Wise guy.
Well, you told me that nothing moves.
This is a student of mine. Trying to give me a hard time. Go ahead.
Well, you said nothing moves.
It doesn't.
So what are we observing?
The mind.
Is there space between the movement?
Not going to go there. That's too technical stuff for these people that are coming here to hear me talk and not you. Go ahead, Doug.
So you have formal meditation, you're sitting on the cushion. And I can't do that for 6.5 hours.
You don't have to.
Right. So is there an optimal time, and is there something that you can practice while you're going through your daily routine or your life to help
No.
with that?
No.
Can you remind yourself?
No. I'm talking.
Okay, you say that pretty good.
I do, and the reason I say that is the form is tight, and it's 6.5 hours, and it's at a monastery. So when somebody comes in, chant do the sutras in the morning, and they follow the forms that are laid out. And I do it myself, but I do it with the monks who live there. We talk about it or come up with ideas about how that should be done relative to the tradition. And it's just a form; it's just a way of practicing. And if someone comes in and sits for practices and maybe an hour and a half, the 2-hour period is not over with yet, but after an hour and a half, they need to go to the bathroom, they go. They don't have to ask permission if they need to go out and stand out in the garden for a while and look at the fish pond or something. Or if they need to actually go back to their apartment or whatever it is and take a nap. I trust the people that come there the idea is to set up the form so it's always about awareness. You can understand that if you're at all confused about what I'm saying in any direction, the only thing I'm emphasizing is the awareness about what occurs, whether it's movement or no movement. So and the reason I shut down Tayo is I could go into that, but I want this to be more directed to people who might not have heard this way of talking before. And Tayo wants to talk about other stuff.
So you can't do a walking meditation.
You can. I'll show you. So everybody's sitting, and then you don't want to sit anymore. So I don't leave that up to the dawn of the timekeeper to decide when each person should walk. I did that for close to 30 years. I don't do it anymore. Why? It's not a good idea. And besides, my teacher died. So you would get up, and you might do something formal out of the cushion. Put your hands in this kind of a posture, so there's some kind of formality, and then you would walk clockwise around, very slowly, like so. And maybe go around once and come back and sit back down. Each person would do that on their own rather than be timed. I think the last month or last Saturday of every month, we have a scheduled retreat where we do actually a formal walking meditation together. Isn't that why we're doing it? The rest of the time, it's up to you. And this is why I think for someone to sit with a gong and decide when you should come and go with your body, it's a misunderstanding, and it actually prevents or cuts into somebody's ability to be responsible for their own feelings and emotions. And it moves that into a form that's too strong for what each individual. Some people can only sit in there for an hour and they need to leave. Some people need to maybe do walking meditation for a whole half hour at a time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying sometimes the physicalness of it, you have to it just becomes almost unbearable. So you want to separate yourself from the body.
You meditate, then get up and move around. The form is there to be observed, not to follow. Be followed. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I know what it's like to follow a form. With the threat, if you don't follow it. Not a good idea. Not a good way to train not only adults, but even children. They should be introduced to the form in such a way that they can begin to understand it and understand what the form is about. So coming and going in there, we have people coming and going all the time in the monastery. Some people just sit there the whole day. Some people sit there for 4 hours at a time. Other people don't come as much. If somebody doesn't come at all, I might ask them, well, I live here. I don't live somewhere else. Go live somewhere else. They said, well, I really like it here. And I would say, well, you probably need to do a little bit more sitting. So, yeah. Yes, Laura.
What advice do you have for those of us who are not in the monastery? How much should we sit there?
The general prescription is like an hour a day. And then try to do some block sitting, which is about block sitting where once every couple of weeks or maybe even once a month, you find a 4-hour block of time. Sit down, hold still. If you have a bell, hit it. If you don't have a water glass, hit the water glass. Always start and finish with a sound. With a sound, don't use your smartphone. Keep that smartphone in the trunk of your car locked. And what do I say? I'm saying because the smartphone, as the technology ramps up, which it's doing, eventually it's going to going to be your reading your mind, and it's going to be telling you what your blood pressure is, and telling you what your blood glucose is, and telling you whether you're having alpha waves or gamma waves, and then it'll take over your meditation and say, you had a really good meditation today. Buy our new app. You know, and so don't do it. I mean, if you want to use it for anything else, fine, but use a wristwatch or something, or use a stick of incense, but don't use that smartphone. Good questions. Did I finish?
Intention. What is the intention?
Meditation.
Yes.
So the intention of meditation, if let's put it this way: if your life is going fine, you're enjoying yourself, and your things are good, then I wouldn't bother meditating. Do whatever you want to do. Enjoy yourself. But if you're having difficulty, rather than go, I mean, you can heal yourself, to use that fancy word. But rather than go to somebody else, I don't care how many shingles they have on their wall. And I have students who are therapists and psychiatrists even. And I'm fine with that. I say practice, but also train your mind along with it. So that you interfere in other people's life, that you do it in such a way that's fundamentally helpful, rather than you're meddling with them based on your preconceptions, judgments, and opinions. Hard to do that if you feel sure you're right, your training is right, and you have all these credentials. Can't you just tell people what to do? Because and so it's really good to be with people, listen to people, listen a lot. The main thing that's difficult about communication, not enough listening, too much talking. Here I am talking away, not listening to you. So, but this is it's just a way of working with it that is more mutual, where we can work with other people. So if you're not suffering, if things are going fine, enjoy yourself. This may be your lifetime to, raise hell, do whatever you want to do. Paint the house red. Yes.
If you are at that point, wouldn't you naturally want to turn around and share?
Who? If who's at what point?
If an individual is having a lifetime where things are going well, not creating a goal, but.
Well, what's the basic question?
The question is, one naturally at that point want to turn around and help others. In
Maybe.
the sense of, okay, now I have learned this method.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay.
There's no, it's too complicated. There's no guarantee of anything. So, but the other thing I would say about that is, if you do have difficulty, where I was going originally, if you do have difficulty, you could actually, do something by watching the way in which the mind keeps building things up and making things worse. What is missed in the consciousness is that the thought process is kind of a bully, and the ego is, the thinking process is muscle bound, and it wants to use those muscles, and it cannot. It's very difficult for it to set it aside. So what we do is you could say we trick it. A little better, you could say we just put the mind in such a place that when you're holding very still, everything tends to want to calm down just because your body is still. Thought process might rotate for a few weeks, few months. You could do it for years, but unlikely, has been my experience. Eventually things start to settle down. You actually have gaps where not much is happening. And it's very difficult to take that not much is happening, or that temporary peace, up into your environment. It has to, you could say, migrate there on its own. You can't force it. Sometimes by sitting, doing a lot of sitting meditation, things can calm down, and then they start to go the other way, because the awareness starting to drop below the radar of ego, and starting to actually function in a really deep level, in what an aspect of consciousness called the Vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness in Buddhism. And when it starts to work in that area, then it's working with the Western world subconscious content in a way. So it's going down, and it's releasing some of the energy that's there. And I don't want to get too fancy about it or too speculative, because I don't know exactly what's going on. But something's happening below the radar of, I know this, I don't know this, I'm good at this, I'm not. Something is happening in a deep way. And there seems to be at some point, or maybe points, or maybe no point at all, that there's a revolution at the basis of your consciousness where there's no longer a solid being anymore. So therefore, there's no one you can't threaten. There's no one here. If there's words and talking and language, but there's no identity behind it, it's kind of a peculiar feeling, but it's possible. There's fundamentally that not that your body couldn't be threatened or your reputation or anything like that, but who you are fundamentally, if you find out who that is, can't be threatened. You can't threaten something that has not come into existence. It's not come into existence, therefore it can't pass out of existence. It's just a kind of odd way of trying to point out the nature of the absolute. Isan.
What is the problem with trying to make peace?
Because it's part of warfare. It gets its meaning from chaos. It looks at chaos and doesn't want that. So the only way, if you want peace, the only way you can get that, and what do I know? It's just the way it looks over here, is you need to look at the warfare. The warfare is the peace is already the case. Warfare is what comes up, and so peace is already the case. So if you're trying to make something, it's already the case. Something fishy about that. As some kind of a little credential you're trying to get, a certain kind of sign you're carrying, a certain kind of flag you're waving. I'm not saying you shouldn't go out and be an idealist and a dreamer and really try to change the world from the bottom up. But it might be a good idea to train your mind and make sure that you aren't taking unexamined chaos in there that suddenly it's like we have a drum, and I use this as an example over and over because it's pretty apropos. We have a big drum that the Dawn, the timekeeper, uses to lead the sutras. It makes a big booming noise. And if the atmosphere, the temperature, the humidity, I don't know what it is, but because it doesn't do it all the time. Sometimes if it's just right in the Zendo or the meditation hall, one of the windows rattles. The rest of the time it doesn't. Then a certain time, that window will rattle. So that's quite often, you could say that's a metaphor for you go into a situation and you meet someone or some situation where something is chaotic, and rather than keep your assumed objectivity, I'm just here to help, I'm just here to support, I'm just here to be kind, I'm just here to be peaceful, you might find that this is another way of finding that we're fundamentally not separate from anything. If you know about all that, then you don't have to get rid of that aggression. Getting rid of aggression, getting rid of ego is a misunderstanding. Ego is unreal. The aggression that bubbles up there is unreal. If you see it's unreal, then you can get very upset, you can get very sad, you can get very depressed, you can get any of that, but it will not take you out. It's just bad weather. And it's not that it isn't uncomfortable, but it doesn't threaten anybody because there isn't anyone. Very, very interesting area to look into, or consciousness. Yes, please.
Did you have a transformative experience, or was there something that brought you to this practice, or just to delving deeper? How old were you, and what?
I read a lot of books. I'm worried about stuff a lot. I was a really bad guy. I stole a lot. I lied all the time. I was pretty much a mess. And I have to lay a little bit of it to my parents' doorstep. I was pretty much left alone all the time, so I got to do a lot of stuff. So that really bothered me a lot. So that kind of caused me to want to look around and see what could I do? What could I do? And I thought, well, I need something. So I joined the Marine Corps. So right now, 3 blocks from where I went to high school, there's a monastery. It's my idea. I'm not inviting anybody, but it's my idea that one of those students might walk into that monastery rather than walk into a place where they train you to kill people. So that, and plus some other things, reading books and then practicing meditation and so on. Inspired by meeting my teacher was in 1973 was powerful. Reading his books and so on made me think maybe there's another way of doing this rather than just running around in circles.
So that was after the Marine Corps? After serving them?
Yeah, that was about 12, 13 years later. So a lot of going in circles. Yes. True.
What about ego?
Yeah, it gets you something, gives you something to look at. I mean, it gives you something to. My teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, and I have to paraphrase. He says, once you realize what it is, then you can resurrect ego. It can function in the service of compassion. That's why some teachers look outlandishly egotistical, and some teachers start to believe in their outlandishness. They think they actually are that, and they start to abuse people. As you know, read the papers; it's showing up all over the place. So it's a very, you could say dangerous, because people can be hurt through that situation. But you could say the idea of what I would say is the interesting thing about it, you don't have to get rid of it. That's kind of an interesting thing, that you don't have to stop being egotistical. You just stop believing your thought patterns. You don't object to them. You don't agree with them. And you certainly don't distract. If you do any of those three, distract or believe or disbelieve, you don't need to have opinions on anything. Opinions are just extra. You don't need them. You can function just fine without having any opinions. Because it looks like we are. I mean, right up into death and going into the Buddhism is called the bardo, or the intermediate state. Going into that intermediate state, we still, just because this situation goes back into the 4, 5, 6 elements, whichever number you want to pick, doesn't mean you go anywhere. You're not going anywhere. So I'm not asking you to believe me. I already warned you about that. But consider it. Who you are when you go to sleep, your body completely goes into just in a state where nothing much is happening, but your mind is all over the place. And attribution, scientists, materialists of sorts want to say that that's happening in well, probably not. They can't find it. All you can find is they stick the needles in there and trigger memories of when you were 5 and first ate a carrot. And then, it's what do they call it? Epidemiology. Basically, they shouldn't capitalize that word. Not science, is it? More about that? That's a good question.
I've just always heard that your dharma follows you from one link to the next. Like if you're not a separate individual, it doesn't follow.
Because the separation looks like it's separate. So as long as it looks like it's separate, just like in a dream, if you're eating a banana in a dream, you taste a banana. It's a dream, but it's sometimes things that happen in a dream can be incredibly real, like a nightmare. Nightmares are, when you're having it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm falling off a cliff, or a dragon is going to eat me, or something like that. So very, very vivid, but the body is just laying there, but the mind is. So the mind, the consciousness of that particular state, they're saying, according to tradition, there's 6 different states that the mind can be in. One of them is the dream state. I would, rather than for me or anyone to go explain too much, I would just contemplate that for a while. Think about that separation. I think that would be a better thing for you to reflect on some and meditate. Sit down, hold still, don't do anything.
Getting back to that one woman's question,
yes.
she asked, I forget what exactly she asked, but you said, find a guru or a teacher is a good way.
Don't find a guru. Find a teacher.
A teacher, or read, you read.
Unless you're from India, then you can find a guru, because that's what they call teachers in India.
So getting back, read book. I have read a lot of books. This is a personal question, but you don't have to answer it. But was there anything experientially that happened to you on your pathway to learning?
Yes.
To where you are now.
Yes.
You don't have to talk about it, but I was just curious.
You asked me.
Yeah.
I don't talk about it?
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I've been on the spot for the last, since I met my teacher, I've been on the spot. I'm on the spot. Every time I look at one of my students, I'm on the spot. I'm on the spot now.
Right, you are.
And I want to be on the spot. I can't help you if I'm not on the spot. If I'm up here and not on the spot, then what good am I? What good am I helping help. So
experientially.
yeah, I would say meeting my teacher made me realize that I was a fool. That's what happened, and it didn't ebb, and I just was very devoted to him. He doesn't have very good press these days, but I knew him. I met him. I knew him. So, and he helped me. So that's where I'm at with it. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. Because my situation, and I don't often say this, but I wasn't really happy with my life at the time. So I don't know if I would have made it. But yes, he helped me, and then he passed away in 1987. Then I met my Zen master in 1990. Didn't realize he was my teacher. It took me a while. It took me quite a while because I kept telling myself, well, I have a teacher. I'm doing all right. I'm good. I don't need another teacher. But he wasn't trying to be my teacher. He was just happened to be there. So anyway, it went on like that. But I think each person's if you have a teacher, or if that happens to you, or what's happening to you now, I think it's good insofar as you can to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt. Let them help you. They'll give you feedback that you may not get from anyone else. All right.
Your awakening experience, instant or gradual?
So awakening is not an experience. This is an experience. Gone. Experiences come and go. Awakening doesn't go. It can't go. It's the very nature. It's who you are. So it's just like you wake up in the morning. You say, "Did you fall back asleep?" Well, no, still here. Doesn't mean you want the metaphor only goes so far. Of course, you're going to go to sleep again, but you don't really realize when you go to sleep. So it's like you wake up and that's just the way things are from now on, and it's not an experience. And I sometimes say, because you don't feel like you did anything, even though you might have worked your butt off to try to see what it was, it's not that you finally saw it. It's just that it's like for me, and I don't know how it is for other people, and I don't claim to be enlightened, but it's like I don't have any more questions. And I actually don't have any answers unless you ask me a question. If you ask me a question, I don't even think about it. I know exactly what to say to you, and it would be different for each person. And I don't read minds. I'm not psychic. My wife is, but I'm not, because she's kind of psychic. But so it's a very, very interesting kind of dynamic to be in. It doesn't feel successful and doesn't feel like you're failing. Even if somebody comes and asks you a question, you answer and they say, I don't care about that. You don't feel like you missed your chance or said something wrong. I rarely, I might do things that are uncomfortable, but I rarely think that I'm incorrect about anything. At the same time, I don't think I'm correct either. So I'm kind of screwed. Yeah, I'm on the spot all the time, always on the spot. Certainly.
Suicide, would you?
Yes, good one.
A lot of interesting people just started to check out where.
Yeah, and it's a very, thank you for asking about that. Do you have a specific question, or do you want me to just comment on it?
No, I think it's just people that I would, from my life.
So, a lot of times people want to save people and want to set up something to do that, and no one's really kind of looking at what's happening with the person. So I've been there, I know what that feels like, and it's totally logical when you're thinking about that. Say, well, why would it make any sense to stay here and feel terrible? I'm just gonna end this. And so I would have a lot of respect for that person's confusion. The important thing I think with people who are going through that is, you had something.
No,
okay.
I'm trying to help a few people, but.
I would say, you have to understand, you could ask another question after I say this because it's very specific. Don't meddle with them and respect their confusion. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to talk them out of that. Actually, you might not be helping them as much as you think. You might feel like a person who's helping a person. Suicide hotline, I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying sometimes people who do that want to be a person who's helpful rather than fundamentally help might be minding your own business. I'm not saying every time, but I'm saying if you're really clear about who you are, you're going to be a lot more clear when you meet somebody else who is in some kind of distress about something, because every single person that could be called a suicide or potential suicide is completely different. You can't apply a protocol to someone, well, these are suicides, so this is how we do it. You know, everyone has to be met. You would not make a good living working with them because there's no money in that. You know, working with people who are so desperate and so unhappy. And the causes and conditions are countless things, the childhood and upbringing and their biology and the food they're eating and the medications they're hooked on or not hooked on, or that they did take or they should take, and the drugs they're using. You know, I probably don't have to say much. It's just so complicated that probably the only thing that you can do that would really be helpful for anyone who is talking about that, or you think that's happening, is two things. One, listen to them. And two, don't interrogate. No interrogation. Just had one more. I make up a lot of stuff. And the other one would be, if you see the opening, not as a manipulation, but if you see the opening, see if you can change the subject a little bit out of that into something else. But it has to be very soft. It can't be looking for any result. If you're looking for a result, somebody is that desperate and is that upset, has an antenna about 15 feet in the air, and they sense anybody's bias right away, and they'll actually use your bias to end their life. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's painful stuff, heartbreaking stuff. But who they are is not just that 22 years or 18 years or 54 years. It's not that. It goes on infinite behind them. There's every year you're dragging millions of years behind you in your karma. I don't mean about past lives. I mean, that could be, I don't know, but everything. More?
No, that's good.
What if you're dealing with like a teenager who's freaked out because his girlfriend broke up with him and he's 16 years old and just strung out on hormones and everything else?
The situation is so situational that there's so many different things that there's no blanket thing, do this, do that. You know, there's just, so I think the only thing you can do is stay in touch, keep it simple, don't panic with them. If you panic, if you get stressed out, I mean, it's almost like you have to actually allow them to be there. You have to allow them to have their feelings, their emotions. You can't trying to teach them out, to talk them out of something like that. Sure, it might feel dangerous because you feel like, you know, because if they did that, then you would blame them. I could have stopped them. Probably not. But you could stay in touch, so that way you'd be there. And maybe what you might, by talking to them, they might find, as much as you would, they might find a way of working with you that would help them in some way. It's so different. It depends on how you're related to them, how long have you known them, and all the different, you know, are they a Virgo? You know, I'm being silly, but I mean, I'm saying that because there's so many different ways of that personality manifests. It's just there's so many different shapes. Look at all the people in this room, and everyone looks different. We're all human, I think. See any aliens? But you know, we're all so incredibly complicated, and that has to be respected. I wouldn't have any students if I didn't really do my best to respect my students until they get in my clutches, and I make them miserable.
The title of the talk was Battle of Ego, working with, I can't remember how he said it, negativity, prejudice.
Yeah.
If we're not living in a monastery, teachers aren't all over the place.
Yes.
You know, how can we work with that so it helps us work with those things?
So don't have to have a teacher, don't have to be a meditator, or don't have to be a Buddhist, or join a meditation group, but you could take some time out. You know, don't even call it meditation. Call it watermelon. Give it a name. Give it some name. Sit down, hold still, face the wall or face the carpet. And you can, if you're a little claustrophobic, don't face the wall. Hold still and don't do anything with it other than watch. And what you'll be introduced to over time is the very things you're trying to avoid. And those can be, to use the common word, those can be processed in your consciousness. So at least you're not ignoring those things. And that way, my teacher would say, you may not attain enlightenment, but at least you won't be a nuisance to everybody.
And why must we close our eyes?
No, you don't close your eyes.
Why must we keep our eyes open?
Yes, okay, good. Well, you're just as dyslexic as I am. Can't hardly teach it. So when you close your eyes, you'll feel better. You'll get into more of a state of calm or peacefulness, which is very good, and I'm all for that if you want to do that. But if you want to begin to get insight into what is happening here, you have to have the eyes open, because we sleep with our eyes closed, we live with our eyes open. So meditate with your eyes open. All the sense fields should be on. Receive sounds, and insofar as you can, don't add on to anything that you're receiving. Whatever's coming, the birds in the treetops, the dog in the yard, sounds, smells, the aftertaste of what coffee or anything is there, just receive. Just be the way I say this over and over again. The most important, the most simple and important and completely direct form of generosity is to give everything your attention. And especially when you're doing sitting meditation, just give your attention to everything that moves. And by doing that, you'll also begin to see that which doesn't seem to be doing much at all. Although it's harder to track that, it has to be some kind of movement. But it's about awareness. It's not about a success story of anything. So the eyes are open because this is how we live. We go to the store. We don't close our eyes to go have a more peaceful time going to the store. That probably would be the last time you go to the store. So eyes open. You want to go to sleep, then close your eyes. Want to wake up, then open your eyes. And then start with this. Start with whatever. And it's a practice, so therefore it takes time. I mean, it can take years to. You probably will notice something right away, and then it might nosedive for a while and get worse. I would say keep it up. Just making it say, I'm going to sit for the next 5 years and see what happens. Once a day, or 5 days a week, 6 days a week. But you don't have to talk to a teaching person or have a sangha or a study necessarily. You might find that if you do that, you might start to have questions about what is showing up, and you might want to go deeper into concepts that have been studied and worked with for 2,500 years, called the lineage. Hundreds of thousands of people back through time. Just basic teachings, more about that. Eyes open.
That's good. I really understand.
Yeah. His eyes are open. Ground receive. Yes.
You said you were a reader. Is that still part of your practice or the practice of the monastery? Or
Doing what?
reading?
Yes. Oh, yes. No, it's not. No, spiritual materialism, simply put, is using spiritual techniques to be somebody better. And spiritual realism, you could say, or sincerity would be using spiritual techniques to see fundamentally what's true yourself. There's nothing to believe. Buddhism is not a belief system. Even if Buddhists tell you it is, tell them to come and talk to me. Not a belief. There's nothing to believe in Buddhism, nor disbelieve, nor look away from. But yes, we read, we study, for years we study every day at noon as a group. Today there was maybe 10 or 12 people studying, and I join in at the end of every one of those groups, no matter where I'm at. If I'm in the monastery, I go there the last half hour. If I'm up here, then I've been going in on Zoom, which is a software that connects people to groups. And so, yeah, we study several different sutras that come out of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century. And we study traditional material, and we study some contemporary material that was written more recently. Yeah, reading is good. Huh? Yeah, I can do a little. We can all do this. It'll be very short. Just give you an idea how I teach this. So sit up straight. Put your feet flat on the floor. Hold it back as straight as possible. If you need to lean back, by all means, lean back. But if you can sit up, hold your back, your vertebrae are stacked up. Since we're sitting in this posture, just have your eyes glance down at the floor, maybe 3 or 4 feet in front of you, or right at someone's back, right at their shirt. And over, so you can put your hands in this posture, left over right with the thumb slightly touching. This is a cosmic mudra. And resting in the mind, the mudra is this one, which is, as I said, a little bit more ordinary. Either one is fine. Eyes are open. Attitude is open. Put everything on receive. Get everything, your attention. Here we go. Holding very still. Watching whatever moves in any of the sense fields, including the mind. Whatever is occurring in your hearing consciousness, such as my voice or the blower up in the ceiling, just receive, just observe that. Observe the texture of that. If thoughts arise around that help you to abandon that sound and go into concepts about it, then just observe that. Keep it very simple. As you sit here, you'll notice that your body awareness becomes stronger. You can feel the back of the chair in your back possibly, or the leading edge of the chair under your knees, your feet in your shoes, your hands in your lap, or wherever they are. And you can feel your diaphragm move, slight movement there, and your breath coming and going. Observe everything that's moving, but don't particularly fasten on anything or fixate on the breath or the air conditioner or my voice. Receive it. But don't hold on. And if you do hold on spontaneously, then just observe that. When thoughts arise in your consciousness, don't follow them. Don't abandon them. Don't add to them. Don't elaborate on them. Do nothing but observe. See if you can see the texture of the thought. See if you can see the shape or the patterning of the thought process. See if you can see the thoughts coming and going. There's nothing to succeed at, so there is no standard for this. Don't set up standards. Thoughts just come and go. Memories, possible judgments, evaluations, analyses. As the great teacher Changu Rinpoche once said, if you do nothing to thoughts, they will do nothing to you. Thoughts are empty of what you think they are. Holding everything very still without being rigid, just observe. This also means that as you're holding still, if your back begins to ache a little bit, just adjust, stretch a little bit, and then return to stillness. There's nothing to maintain. So, any questions about that short meditation practice?
So I started thinking about the pit spitters.
About what the what?
The pit spitters. It's a local baseball team that was in a championship game on Friday.
Yeah, how they doing?
They won.
All right.
So it came into my mind. And then I went to a series of elements of that game. And
Okay. What's the question?
so was I adding?
Doesn't matter. No, you're just observing it. All you're doing is describing to me what the forms that come into your awareness. Does not matter what they are. If you think it matters what they are, this is the nature of the ego that we go to war with, or that goes to war with us. So it doesn't matter. What you're doing over time is you're kind of, it's not exactly this way, but I'm going to say it specifically to your question, that you're kind of depersonalizing. You're taking some of the story content out of it by just watching the form. Memory comes up, the memory goes away. Another memory comes up, memory goes away. It sounds like you're just watching what was moving, just memory showing up. Everyone had their own version of this kind of thing, something going. Some people probably even left the room and were somewhere in the south of France until I struck the bell, and then back. So you're doing whatever, and some people might just be here looking at the carpet here, looking at someone's back, might not have gone anywhere at all. There's no success or failure to it, because what you're doing, I'm going to go to this metaphor. I use this quite a bit because I think it may help, maybe not everyone, but it'll help some people tune into what meditation is for. Meditation isn't about sitting here and having really good, wonderful meditative experiences. People come and say, I had a really good meditation. I say, great. I had a really great bad meditation. Great. I'm not here to, it's meditation. It may be good, maybe bad, but the important thing is to do it. The reason I say that is meditation is, and this, again, it's a metaphor, it's limited, but it's like taking the mind, the mind is like a blade, a knife, and we're constantly chopping everything with it. We're thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about this, thinking about that, chopping this. Most people never bother sharpening that blade at all. Meditators, they just a metaphor, so it doesn't work all the way, is like they set down, hold still, and they pull that blade of awareness back away from the thought process, which still may show up and be magnetizing, and put it on a stone, which is very boring to the knife blade, and sharpen the blade. And the way you'll notice the way meditation will show up is not so much in the meditation itself, which is just basically boring. You're weaning yourself away from the desire for entertainment, so it's kind of boring. But where it will show up is in your interaction with others. You'll be much more clear. It's not something you're doing, it's something you are. You stop interfering with your clarity. You stop interfering with your awakened nature. You are born awakened. There's no Buddha. There's no any. All I see is a Buddha everywhere. You just don't know it. So I'm trying to say, wake up. Isn't that true? Bang, bang, bang. We hear stories about the mean Zen master. That's not true, is it? So, but in order for someone to teach in a direct way like that, you have to have permission. You have to have some kind of connection with the teacher where I don't know, I don't like to use the word trust because I don't want to, somebody doesn't need to turn over their intelligence. I want someone to use their intelligence, but what I would say, give me the benefit of the doubt. If I'm doing something that you think is inappropriate or something, give it some space, see what it's about. In the Buddhist tradition, the bodhisattva, or the enlightening being, which is the Mahayana practice, will do anything to save all beings, anything to save them. And so sometimes the bodhisattva is quite outlandish. Train them out. Sharpen your blade. Do it a lot. Yes.
That's really what my question was about. Having had the experience, you said past experience, but having the perception was one naturally, I'll use the word service, want to.
I'm listening. What's the question?
Doesn't one want to automatically and naturally or to expand a perception?
Okay, now that's a good question. But the conventional way of helping others is wanting to be a person who helps others. The Bodhisattva no longer has that inclination. They don't see anything but Buddhas everywhere. But the people who they see as Buddhas don't know they're Buddhas. So the Bodhisattva may enter into that situation in order to help them. But there's no feeling of helping in the conventional sense, like being a nurse or joining the Peace Corps. It's not conventional situation. Now if the person is highly has a high intelligence and feels very altruistic and has strong heartbeat around what's happening, of course they're going to do that. But that if they haven't examined the aggression, and if they think that they're really peaceful, they're probably going to be in for it. I'm not saying they're going to create chaos. They might not have as a comfortable time in the Peace Corps as they thought they were going to, because they're not clear on who they are. They don't know who they are, as Socrates said, know thyself. Yes.
Inspired by a place or their holy places.
This is a holy place. Absolutely. If I'm inspired. There isn't, from the perspective of this teaching, everything is sacred. It just looks like they're sacred and profane. That's relative truth, and that's why we have so much trouble. That's why we disrespect some people and raise other people without even knowing we're doing it. It's painful to watch, but don't go to war with anything. The dependent origination is so completely vast and powerful that you have the opportunity to work with a basic teaching of the Buddha, which is dependent origination. It means that there's no single thing anywhere. Everything is dependent on everything else for its apparent individuality or identity, including this person, including you. If you realize that, you're in the service of everyone from now on. And to one person, it might be being extremely kind and loving and protecting, even though they're an ass. And to another person who is extremely sweet and wonderful, and you might give them a good kick. I mean, I'm not saying you would hit them, but if you did, it would be soft. So, yes.
If the core of this meditation is to rise over and do what are the prayer beads for?
So prayer beads are a different way of training the mind. The Zen tradition, the Zen, but the Tibetan tradition is very about doing mantra. So mantras you use these to count. Or the Japanese do it a little bit differently, but the Tibetans do. I don't have the beads that I've used for that, but I've done literally millions of mantras. So I'm talking about experience. You can do mantras, and I'll teach you, and I teach some people to do them. If they want to do them, I'm happy to teach you to do White Tara mantra or other practices like that, or just make up a mantra. But the most important thing you can do, I think, is sit down, hold still, and look at something and wean yourself away from the desire for entertainment. I'm not saying don't be entertained. Have a good time. You can actually have a better time if you're not hooked on the damn entertainment. Because then you can, go ahead.
Well, I just wonder with the Zen Buddhism, I don't really know that much about it. And then there's these other things that you're doing. So there's the meditation you showed, which obviously there's different parts of teachings.
There are.
And then you have the beads. So it's like,
yeah. Well, the beads are, this is one that was made by a student of mine, her daughter, Rasheen's daughter, Sophia. So she made these. So I've been wearing them for a few years. But you would just sit down and you might have a visualization. You may do some kind of preliminary practice as a bodhisattva vow or the refuge vow, and say that in order to give yourself a structure. And then you would, usually it's 108. This is, I don't know how many she put on here. Then you would pull the beads towards you. And it's just a way of giving you something to do with your hands, giving you something to do with your mind, so that you'll sit still and watch what moves. But you're creating what moves. So you're actually saying, the White Tara mantra would be Om Tari Tutari Turn Mami Puri Jana Pushuk Grace, and you draw the bead towards you. Om Tari Tutari Turn Mami Puri Jana Pushuk Grace. And then you draw the bead toward it. And you do that for maybe one whole mala. And it's just another way of working the mind that is tightening down on the thought process, so it can't move around so much. I think I've done a lot of it, but I really think the best thing to do is to sit down and just, instead of creating your own, to watch the one that's already happening in your mind, rather than try to block out who we are and try to be some other person. I could be all wet here. Talk to the Dalai Lama. You'd probably say, oh, don't listen to that guy. I don't know, but I would say if you're drawn to Tibetan, so I had a Tibetan teacher and I studied that pretty extensively. If somebody's drawn to that and they came this direction and they wanted to practice in that way, we could certainly do that. Start out with 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 repetitions of Vajrasattva mantra. That's just a start. That's just a preliminary practice. So it's a lot. That's one of the reasons it's hard to do, because people have lives, they have jobs, they have families. And only a few people want to be monks, and even the monks need to work because it's not a good business to be in. Yes, sir.
Why is it, do you think, that so many traditions lean upon closing the eyes during meditation?
Misunderstanding. Because, when I say because, I don't know, but it seems like Vipassana is all about doing that. Ancient Goenka, who taught in the prisons in India and had so much success with, of course, it's a big contrast. These people in prison, suddenly they're taught a practice where they sit down, hold still for 8-10 hours a day for 10 days. Of course, they're going to feel better, because you sit there and do nothing. Eventually, you start reviewing your life. But it will do that for you, but it's not necessarily going to train you to get up off the cushion and go out and face people. That will wear out in that kind of meditation practice. I know I have students who've practiced in that way for long periods of time. They're students of mine. Why? Why aren't they awake? Why are they coming to me? Because it's a circular. And so, and I'm not saying it always would be that way, but it's more of a maintenance. When you do eyes closed meditation like this, and you scan the body and do the different forms, so Satipatthana and Vipassana, you're creating a state of mind. You're actually creating something that is peaceful. And you could go into what's the traditionally called the jhana states, which are entering states of consciousness that are without form and are quite profound states, but they're states. And we have to, you can't be in some kind of other state when you're here. You need to be here. And so this shikantaza won't take you out of the room. It'll help you be aware that you keep leaving the room. And so that way you can be present. So there's only this moment. Yes?
Probably has some students have OCD, and I find it really hard to break free from the same repetitive thoughts.
What's the question?
Yeah, when I tried this before,
give me a question.
Same thoughts.
Ask the question. Just a question. I know what you're talking about. Give me
What advice can you give for someone that has these same ridiculous thoughts?
You mean like me? What advice have I give myself? I'll tell you what I would say. Set up a time, 7 o'clock every morning, and meditate for 15 minutes. You don't have to do an hour. Do it, but do it consistently, to over and over and over and over. No matter what happens, sit down, have a bell. Don't do it with a clock not with a clock. Don't do it with a smartphone. Start and sit there, hold still, sit there for 15 minutes, and whatever occurs is your meditation. There's an assumption that the meditation should be clean and clear and no thoughts. And no, your meditation is going to be full of garbage trucks. It could be anything, but the idea, it's about awareness, not what happens. The form that happens in the awareness is where the ego mind gets caught and thinks something's wrong. I'm doing this wrong. That's why it's good to have a teacher. So the teacher could say, no, go back. Keep going. You follow me? Another question about that? If you have it, all you have to do is repeat.
Yeah.
Sit down straight.
Maybe it's just attrition, right? It's just not going to happen first 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and it's always the same thing. I look at the spot and
watch my foot.
Whatever thought is in my brain that day.
Watch my foot. Watch it. Stop it. When I'm saying stop it, I'm saying just keep it simple. Just sit down, and if it takes off this way, if your mind is just full of problems or ideas or judgments or evaluation, just concentrate on the form. Sit down, hold still, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, half an hour, strike the bell, get up and forget it. Don't try to fix your life. Be aware of the life. So then because if you fix a problem based on your ideas about the problem, this is what you're looking. You're not looking at the problem. You're looking at your ideas about your judgments, preconceptions, your epidemiology. And not that it couldn't have something that's true, but chances are you're missing some aspect of it. But if you're really aware of it, it just starts to take care of itself because there's no solid self anywhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I'm glad you said that. Yes.
So I think for me, I spent a lot of years stuffing feelings and trauma
Yeah.
in my past. And anytime I try to start meditating in earnest, I have fear.
Yeah.
Things are going to come up.
The-
So can you give more advice
Yeah, I
on
can.
when that fear starts to take
Yeah.
over?
The downside of what is the fear. Fear. But the upside is you're actually looking at the issue. You're sitting. Some people take months before they start to get afraid, and then it's good to have a teacher and a sangha or community so that you've got other people that you can practice with. That's what I would suggest that. It'd be up to you. But if you wanted to continue to meditate, probably sitting with a group would be a good idea. The other way is just do it a short period of time. Like I was saying, you're just sit down for 5 minutes and make that as clear as you can that you're going to sit there no matter how afraid you get. At the end, ring the bell, and then add a minute every couple of days.
So when you have something bad in your mind,
Like right now,
what do you do with it?
nothing. Don't do anything with it. Comes and goes. Don't. If you push, you're covering up what you need to see. And if you pull, in other words, if you're aggressive, or if you go the other way and you're trying to explain it or soothe yourself or convince yourself or add on anything, it just makes it more complicated and more likely to come back with a different mask on. Or distracting yourself. That's why I don't teach mantras, because mantras is a way of distracting yourself out of what you might want to be looking at. Not wrong, you could do a mantra, but I'd rather have you sit and look at the wall for a few hours. And so when I say I'm not experiencing the kind of fear you're talking about, but I have worked with that a lot. You just have to sit through it. It's good to have somebody to talk to about that is not that you couldn't talk to a therapist or a psychiatrist or something like that. Might be good to somebody who's spent a lot of time on the cushion, a lot of time doing the very practice that you're endeavoring to do, who has that kind of credential. Yes?
Will that fear eventually lessen?
That's an interesting question. I love this question. What will happen is that fear may come and may go, may get larger, smaller, may get more prickly, may get more scary, may get darker, may get lighter, still may be fearful. But what will happen over time, and there's no guarantee, what will happen over time is you won't mind. You won't mind being afraid. Because there isn't anyone. There's not. It's like watching a horror movie, or a scary movie. You kind of, I'm not saying you enjoy it, but you're willing to watch it because you know it's unreal. But it's still scary. You don't want anybody to know you're going to the kitchen because you're afraid of what's going to happen next. So, yes, right here.
So if the person who's seeing the trauma in the past or something that shows up, to express that trauma through crying or whichever way, is that an acceptable release?
Yeah. I cry quite often myself. I probably cry more now than I ever have.
So I've meditated all different kinds, just lots of different ways.
Yes.
But if you want a teacher, if I wanted you to be my teacher, what does that mean and how do you do it?
So people ask, and I say, I often say, don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't need a teacher, don't ask me. If you need a teacher, then you should ask me. But if you ask me, then I'm going to say, here's what you need to give me the benefit of the doubt. You need to follow these instructions. I'm not talking about worship or obeying. I'm not going to tell you anything that's unreasonable. But function that way. So everyone's a little different side. Some people that are students that I don't hear from too often, they're off in the distance, and other people I hear from every single day. And that's up to them to do that. But don't drag people in and scold people because I don't hear from them. I might send them a text. Now that we have all this technology, I might send them a text and say, hi. Are you still alive?
No, I'm just so aware in the world that we live in, and obviously centuries ago, but that you can certainly increase or vault your practice, get there faster.
I don't know if you can get there faster about that. I mean, that may or may not be true, but I think it's really important to have. And I'm not saying it can't be done without a teacher. There's a few cases where that's happened. a spontaneous realizer, and there might be a few dozen or more maybe in history, but pretty unlikely to do it, to cut into, have the kind of karma where suddenly you just realize what this is, because it is a profound realization that is not. You can't think your way. You can't figure this out. You can't think your way because it's circular. It has to be a fundamental giving into what this actually is, which is not separate. It sure looks separate. We reinforce it by blaming and crediting. They get credit and they get blame, or I get blame. We blame ourselves. That's another sneaky form of battle of ego. But yeah, you would ask. You would meet the teacher and ask the teaching person. At least my understanding of it is that way. More. How do we do that? Leave? One final question if you have it, and then we can close. Well, I guess I made myself very clear. Thank you so much. To meet all of you.
So on the back table over there, we have, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm not supposed to plug or sell anything, but Sokuzan has this book called The Meditation Primer, and he gives guided meditations at the monastery where he teaches.
Just like we just did.
We just recorded them and then transcribed them, and then we give them out. Well, we charge $15 for them. We can't sell them here, but you can get them online. And then we use these in prisons. We just give them out. So it's a helpful start to your meditation. So if you want one, the contact to the website to get these is on the back table. And likewise, the contact for the monastery down in Battle Creek, where you can see videos of Sokuzan. And there's cards too. Or our local Traverse City group, where we're practicing as an extension of that community. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
When do you guys meet?
Oh yeah, we meet on Tuesdays. We're renting space at the UU right now, so we have a study group. We do a short traditional Buddhist service. We chant the Heart Sutra. Then we sit for about 40 minutes, and then we read out loud, slowly study, bring up the material, cutting through spiritual materialism in the context of our practice. And then the last half hour, we dial in with Sokuzan to ask questions. And then once a month, we have a day-long retreat, renting space at the UU. Again, they've been generous, where we come and we meet at 9 o'clock and we're done at 4. We do some long sits, but everybody can get up and move around as they want to. We have a communal lunch and a couple of Dharma talks. People can come for part of it or all of it. So if you have any questions about it, our contact is there. We have a sign-up sheet for our email list. If you want to do that and stay connected, you can do that, or go on the website and sign up for the email list. Thanks for asking that.